In this video, we're going to look at the top 5 most common questions that are asked in teacher interviews, and I'm going to help you plan fantastic answers that will land you the teaching job. So the first question, which is guaranteed to come up, is some sort of question around safeguarding. So for example, how would you deal with a safeguarding incident? And any safeguarding question, the first thing they're always looking for is that you make safeguarding your priority. You don't go off and do other tasks when you have a safeguarding issue. You absolutely focus on the safeguarding. So for example, if you've got a class coming in, you might get another teacher to cover for you at the start of the lesson so you can deal with that safeguarding issue, because safeguarding is your first and most important job as a teacher. The next thing they're checking for is they want to see that you're aware of the policy, so you know the correct way to deal with this situation. I'm going to show you exactly how you should deal with that according to the current frameworks. And lastly, you have to show that you are competent. Basically, they're asking this to see if you can be trusted with the health and well-being of students. And if they are not convinced that you are competent, the school should not be employing you. So that's why this question is so important. It is absolutely crucial to the interview. And if you don't do well on this, you are not going to get the job because it would be unsafe to employ you. So when you've hit those 3 key points, what you're next going to do to really reinforce it is talk through the correct procedure for dealing with the safeguarding incident. And it's a really simple 3-step process. So the first thing is that you're absolutely clear on the priority. And I can't emphasize the importance of showing that this is your priority enough, because that's the key element to success on this question. Second thing you're going to do is you're going to talk about the fact that you're going to listen to the student. For example, if you're getting a disclosure, you're going to record everything. You're going to believe what the student is telling you. You're not going to be judgmental. You're not going to promise any sort of secrecy. Like if the student says, I'm going to tell you this, but please don't tell anyone else, you can't promise that. You can never promise that in a safeguarding situation. And also, you're going to be very clear on who it is that you need to report that to. And so you're going to be aware of exactly who is the safeguarding lead in the job that you are applying for, and that you are going to be aware at all times who that person is when it changes, and you're going to pass everything onto that person. You're not going to do any investigation or any digging, and you're not going to ask any leading questions. So if you get all those key ideas in, you should reassure the person that you are familiar with what should be done with safeguarding and that you can be trusted with the health and well-being of students. It is also great if you can show some evidence of recent training, and I would strongly recommend that you do your research to make sure you're absolutely 100% up to date with this. So the second question is, why did you become a teacher? And it's amazing how badly some people do on this. There is quite a lot of people in education who don't particularly like children, and that comes across very strongly in their interview and puts the interviewers right off. So here's some things that I suggest are always good to talk about, and you have to tailor it to your individual circumstances. So you want to talk about the impact you can have as a teacher, that you are opening doors for your students, and that you are getting students interested in your subject, and that you have a massive impact on their life as a teacher. You can talk about the love of your subject. That goes for absolutely any subject and any teacher, from all the way down to early years right up to just before university. Loving your subject is a super important thing to get across at the interview. One common failing that people have in this is they may talk a lot about the love of their subject, but they don't actually bring it back to young people. You have to show that you are passionate about working with young people, because a lot of teachers sadly are not. And if you can show genuine passion, that massively boosts your impression when you're at interview. A good thing to mention if you're applying in more challenging circumstances is to be open about the fact that you're aware that it's challenging, but you know that this is the right place for you, that in a challenging school with educational disadvantage, that is where you should be. That's where you feel you can have the best impact. And if you've got experience working in those areas, linking that to your previous experience is really good. And being passionate about working in challenging situations is really good if you're applying for more challenging schools. And lastly, showing a passion for education. So being aware of what education can do for your students, and the importance of education, and linking that to why you became a teacher is also a really powerful way to answer that. So make sure you plan this question carefully, because if you answer this badly, why are they going to employ you as a teacher? If you're not really got a good explanation why you're a teacher, it is very concerning. So score highly on this question, or it's going to really come back and bite you. So let's look at the third question. How do you deal with disruption and manage pupil behavior? And this is essential to being a good teacher. And there's some things that they really want to hear in answers, and they just represent good practice and what you should be doing anyway in your classroom. You should always start with high expectations. Being aware of the expectations that the school has and their behavior policy is a really great way to approach this question. You're going to talk about modeling the behaviors. For example, if you expect students to be polite to people, you have to also model that behavior. So you are behaving in the way that you would like your students to. So modeling positive behavior is really good. You ought to be aware of exactly the policy for behavior that the school uses. Do they have a stage system? Do they have C1, C2, C3? Do they have some other system? Positive and negative. Talk about the positives as well. So what are the reward systems? Because the reward systems are actually part of the discipline system in a school. And if you create a culture of positivity, that the students want to participate, they want to do well, they're being rewarded, some of those behavior issues will just reduce. You want to also talk about being calm and consistent. So consistency is absolutely essential in success with pupil behaviors, and also remaining calm, that if a student is exhibiting a very bad behavior, that you can remain calm in that situation. And also a really great thing to mention is that you separate the student from their behavior. You don't have any problems with the student on a personal level, and you're not trying to change them, you're just trying to modify their behavior. So you always separate the person and the behavior, and every single lesson is a new start for that student, and you don't carry around that negativity with them. And a great thing to talk about and also do in your practice is positive directional cues. So instead of yelling at the students, stop banging on the windows, stop playing with your pen, stop shouting out, which is drawing attention to exactly what you don't want to see. It's about reframing the language in positive ways. So saying things like, instead of stop banging on the windows, I need everyone's attention at the front. I want everyone listening. We all need to come back together to do this. So talking about what you want to see rather than yelling about what students are doing wrong. And it's actually really powerful in the classroom. And I recommend, if you haven't tried it, try it. It makes a huge difference. So if you can get all those elements together and go through each of those things on the slide, it is a good answer and also represents good practice that you should be doing in your classroom. So let's look at question 4. How do you set high expectations for students? So if you can't set high expectations, your students won't make amazing progress. So the way to answer this is to start by saying that you've got clear expectations and say what your expectations are. For example, you expect students to complete all the work that's set, and how do you enforce that expectation? You can also talk about positive reinforcement. So when students are meeting your high expectations, how do you reward students? How do you give them praise? And how does that link in with the school's systems for positive reinforcement? Quality first teaching is super important. So sometimes teachers really struggle with behavior, but then when you look at the quality of their lessons, the students don't know how to do the work and they're struggling because the teaching isn't very good. So having good teaching improves behavior and flows beautifully into setting high expectations. So if you're teaching students very well, it's much easier to maintain high expectations of work if they've been subject to very good instruction. You can talk about parental engagement, how you engage with parents to help support parents in setting those high expectations, and that you work with parents to reinforce those high expectations. For example, if a student hasn't completed homework, you work with the parents to make sure that it is done, and you are consistent in doing that. The last thing is that you always include stretch and challenge in your lessons. So when a student has completed all the work, there's always something to go on to, there's always something more difficult, and that you're always pushing students to be one level beyond where they are. So you're always trying to get students to make progress beyond all the way to the absolute highest grade. You're always setting those high expectations and pushing and stretching your students. And let's look at the last question, question 5. How would you deal with an angry parent? And this question can come as a surprise to people, and they don't typically answer it very well. And the first thing that you're always going to do, and remember in the first question, we banged on about safeguarding being a priority. Your number one priority is to safeguard pupils. So if a parent comes in and is very angry, your first concern is to the pupils. So you want to perhaps remove that parent from where pupils are, perhaps into another colleague's office, a senior member of staff, so they are away from the students. The students shouldn't be exposed to angry or abusive parents. That needs to be taken away from the eyes of students. So you're safeguarding pupils first and foremost. Once you've got that accomplished, you want to be calm and empathetic. Generally, angry parents that come in are not ready to listen to your side of the story until they feel like they have been listened to. They often come in with something to say and they just want you to listen. And so just being calm, empathetic, really understanding exactly where they're coming from is an essential first step, because once they've kind of sounded off a little bit, that is the point that you can come in and have a sensible conversation with them. And the last one that I've put very big is professionalism. You're never going to shout at a parent. You're never going to get angry with a parent. You're always going to represent the school in a really positive way that makes the parent come round ultimately to your way of thinking and builds on the parents' feedback and fosters a good, positive relationship with parents. Because if schools don't have positive relationships with their parents, it is so much harder to achieve the school's aims. So hopefully these 5 questions were really helpful to you and that you feel slightly better prepared for your interview. And finally, thank you very much for watching.